Welcome back to another exciting episode. I'm your host, Myron Turner. This is the Immigration Stat Us podcast. Man, I'm so grateful for every time you guys click play on these episodes. We put our heart and soul into them. Want to give a big thank you to the Navigators group. Big thank you to the Oranga group. I want to give a big thank you to the Ministry of Ethnic Communities as well, and the Campfire Studios. Today, we're talking to Simbarashe Tembo, and he's all the way from Harare, Zimbabwe. So please tune in. It's going to be awesome. The theme today is living wage. We're also going to get his amazing travel story to New Zealand. He's been here for 3 years. Imagine that. Only 3 years, but he's got an amazing story to share. Tune in. Okay, Simba, welcome. And man, I just want to thank you for being here. This has been 2 or 3 weeks in the making now. Caught me in isolation before we had to cancel an episode. I'm here joined with a very special co-host, Danny Mwinga, who has been on the podcast before, back by popular demand. No, I'm just joking. No one actually emailed me to ask you to come back. I'm just No, seriously though, all jokes aside, I really appreciate, everything that you bring to the table and your provocative, just the way you think, man. Like, that's why I'm honored to have you here. Help me co-host today and talk to Simba and get his story. Before we get into the whole living wage thing and talk about money, let's talk about your story, man. Like, so you've been here for 3 years, right?
Right.
So what brought you to New Zealand? How did this? Why New Zealand? I ask everybody the same question, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way. For all of you diehard Kiwis out there, I'm just curious. All the way from Harare.
Yep.
Please help me. I'm an American. Harare. Harare. Why do I keep putting extra W where it doesn't belong?
Yeah, so it's Harare.
Harare.
Yeah, that's
Harare.
That's how you pronounce it properly.
That's how I pronounce it from my Shona accent. You know what I mean? Like,
Harare.
Harare.
Yeah.
Harare.
That's not what he said.
That's what he said. Harare.
You sound more American than me.
But you got it.
Yeah, Harare, right?
Harare?
Yep.
Harare.
It sounds a bit weird when he says it, doesn't it?
Harare, Zimbabwe.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. We'll be right back from Harare, Zimbabwe. Okay. Why? Why New Zealand? What brought you here?
Interesting. So, what actually brought me to New Zealand was love.
Here it comes.
To New Zealand.
There's no tissue here, so if you cry, I'm just going to let you cry. I'm just going to let you cry.
Nah, don't worry. Today, we're not crying.
Okay.
Yeah,
we'll see about that.
But, I think the main reason I ended up in New Zealand was because of love.
Tell us more. Yeah. Tell us more about this love. What is this love? What is love?
So this is what happened some time back, a couple of years back, being on Instagram and being Instagrammers, I just happened to be following this beautiful lady. And so it had been years of following her, but we never had a conversation, you know what I mean? So
you were stalking her.
I was just thinking the same thing. It was just like,
you call that stalking?
No, that's not stalking.
What was it called?
We were following each other.
Oh, okay.
And I think stalking is when you have intentions, but during those
But you
days,
had intentions, didn't you?
No, during those days when I started following her, I didn't have intentions. It was just one of those.
He's already sweating.
I know, right?
Okay, I'm sorry. We're going to be quiet. Continue. Continue.
Take team on me?
We're just asking questions, man.
But, so I just decided, why not just have a chat with her? She posted this funny video where she was bubbly and, having fun. And I was like, this is what I love. I just love and I just love to be happy. And, and so long story short, ended up going to the DMs and,
slid into those DMs.
One conversation led to the next. And I'm on the flight to New Zealand.
So did you follow her first or did she follow you first?
Actually, I don't even know, but I think I did first.
Oh, you don't know.
All
Huh?
right. Okay,
Yeah,
you did
big
first.
Mine gets like hazy at that
Because
point.
it was years, back, I think around 2013, 2014.
Yeah.
And we only started talking in 2018. So it was years of just following each other. You know, it's one of those random people that you just see, but you don't really know who they are and they don't know
Right.
you. You just don't talk, you know, but you just, you know, and I think those days, you know, when you're young and you just get into that kind of thing where you just want to have followers and
Right.
follow people and, you know, kind of thing. And it's not even there in your head. But then later on, you know, I was just like, wait a minute. I think it was the time when when I was looking for a person to, you know, get things pretty serious with and settle down, you know what I mean?
So, okay, so the immigration process itself. I mean, everyone in this room, you know, everyone at this table anyway, we've gone through that immigration process one way or another. So how was it for you? Do you feel like it was a slick, smooth transition, or it was like kind of rough, or?
Well, I would say it was smooth, but I can't say that I didn't. I had my fears, you know, because I think besides New Zealand, the only other country that I traveled to was Botswana, and you didn't need a visa, you didn't need to process anything. It's just you and your passport, and you just go, you know. And there was that. But then with New Zealand having to apply for a visa, you know, and I think the thing was having to know which kind of visa to apply for and how to go about the whole process. It was, I think it needed a lot of research, especially when you're on the other side, you know, when you're all the way in Africa and, you know, you want to research on immigration stuff in terms of coming to New Zealand and stuff. I think you won't get as much stuff as compared to somebody who is here in New Zealand. But yeah, I guess because my other half was here in New Zealand, so it was sort of like a tag team. You know, she looks over here, I look over there, and we sort of like work together and getting information because we didn't use like some people use agents.
No agents, yeah.
Yeah. So, but for us, it was just, you know, just going straight through immigration and researching information for ourselves, and and applying to the immigration. So I would say it was smooth.
She's a resident.
She's a citizen.
She's
now.
a citizen, okay.
Yeah.
So you obviously applied on a partnership visa.
Yes, but at first, I think the plan was not to come to New Zealand for as long as I've been in New Zealand.
Right.
Like, it's almost 3 years now in October. But the plan was to just come and visit, you know. And I think we were planning for me to just come and visit, see New Zealand, and, you know, just get to know each other. And, you know, since we were living like worlds apart, and it was a matter of, you know, getting to know each other's spaces and then make a decision from there. But apparently, what ended up happening was the parents then had a surprise trip for the kids back to Zimbabwe to see their relatives because they've got most of their relatives back in Zimbabwe. So it was a surprise trip, and all of a sudden she tells me I'm coming to Zimbabwe. I was like, oh, wow.
Oh.
Yeah, so from then it was, you know, a matter of, okay, so at first we were going to apply probably for a visitor's visa, but now it's probably we need to research on much more than just a visitor's visa. Yeah.
Did you guys when she came over to Zimbabwe, did you get married then?
No.
You didn't even get married then.
No, we didn't get married then because when she came to Zimbabwe, that was our first time meeting in December 2018. And after being in a relationship for like 8 months, you know, and so that was our first time, but then we got engaged then.
Right.
Yeah. And so when she came back, we still maintained those plans of me coming to New Zealand, but then it was no longer me coming to New Zealand to just visit. It was more so me coming to get married, you know, because, you know, we had gotten engaged and we were both at a stage where we were ready to get married. So
that's awesome.
Why not? Yeah.
Okay. So when you come to New Zealand, obviously you guys, you know, get settled in, start building into communities. Obviously her existing community she already had. What are some of the highlights for you? Like, did anything wow you here when you got here? You're like, oh wow, New Zealand. What did you have any wow New Zealand moments?
I did. I want to say I did because it's two different worlds. I think looking at where I'm coming from, it's a place where it's pretty much the same in terms of the systems, and probably you want to talk about how you drive here in New Zealand and comparing it to back home. It's pretty much the same, but it was more being in a functional system. You know what I mean? And in a system that's efficient. You just
What do you mean by functional?
What do I mean by functional?
Well, look, I mean, I just want to know. I mean, I want to know, what are the main differences? A lot of people here, including myself, never been to Zimbabwe, and
yeah. So, what I meant by functional was comparing to the time when I left Zimbabwe. During that time, you would have to wait like in a long queue, for example, to get gas. You know what I mean? And back home, it's fuel, and here we call it gas.
Yeah.
But it's those things that you just go to maybe a Gal, you go to whatever Z or Mobile, and you just drive straight. You just self-service.
So you had one queue to get petrol in your car.
But back home, it was more fuel is scarce. So it's kind of a hassle. When you want to get petrol, whether diesel, you have to have somebody that probably lives close to the service station. And you're like, hey, just let me know if the service station has got some gas, and I can come and fill up, that kind of thing. So it was a matter of okay, New Zealand is good in terms of having things that are efficient. You know what I mean? You get to the gas station, you go to the grocery store, self-service, But then, it was more like that. And I think more so we'll get to it.
Yeah. No, we'll circle back to that. So obviously, that was one part. But what about, okay, it's only been 3 years. So it's got to be at least one thing that's been like a really low point for you here, like kind of integrating into this culture, from that culture to this culture. Has there been any low points?
Definitely there are some low points. I think trying to fit into the culture, I think when I first got to New Zealand, the question that I had in my head was, what is the native language, or the original people that settled in New Zealand, or that and I think this is also because of the places that I probably hang around, because at first I heard that the Maori are the native people in here.
That's right.
But then as time went along, I think I met a lot of people from other countries like Tonga, Samoa, like surrounding islands and stuff like that. So I think it was one of those things that, trying to fit it into the culture now. So which culture? Culture, exactly, because you've got diverse cultures all in one. You know what I mean? Like, for example, at my first job, somebody's trying to teach you their language from their island. But I'm like, wait a minute, you're not native New Zealander. You know what I mean? I'm more interested to learn the New Zealand culture. You know what I mean? So it's more of, there is a mix. There is a mix of cultures from different places, and you're trying to get so it's a little bit difficult to fit in. And because people sometimes they don't understand where you're coming from, and they don't know where you're coming from.
Yeah,
so
I found the same thing when I got here. Like, it's just this you got Tongans, and you got Samoans, then you got the Fijians, then you got Indians, then you got Chinese and Japanese, Filipinos. It's just all these different things. Everybody but what you would expect, because when you get off the plane, everything is Maori.
Yep.
Everything on the wall is,
exactly.
It's like Maori, like you're learning, and then like even it's the haka, it's this, it's that, and then it's like when you're actually in your neighborhood or at your job, you're actually dealing with 6 or 7 different cultures that you weren't expected to deal with.
Yeah.
And they speaking in their language and they're speaking in like, they would be really tough. That's like a complex cultural low point, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah.
And just out of interest, was your expectations, were they based on what you had sort of heard or researched online? Because it's quite interesting because Myron, you had the same sort of same experience as well. When you came in, you found that it was quite hard to maybe, I guess, interact with with Maori people, right?
Yep.
With Maori community, as it were. And it was quite interesting that when you search online from outside of New Zealand, you have no idea of the mix, I suppose, right?
Yep.
Right. It's only when you come in, you're like, actually, if you understand, look at the Maori people, I guess we call them the native people, as it were. It's like you don't, for example, you don't see them everywhere, as it were, right? It's not like they're everywhere. You see the whole blend of mix of people, right? But at the same time as well, I don't know whether it's as easy to spot people that might be Maori. I don't know.
It's not, because Maori people have so many different shades to them, just like black people, just like It's just like, man, I know. I got so many Maori friends that look like just normal. They look like white people. They look like white people. But then, like, if you say that it's like you have started World War III. It's like, bro, I'm Maori. It's like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know. I literally didn't know. Like, then they give us a pass because we're not from around here. So it's like, then they start. The one thing I like about Maori people, though, like if I were to just interject, like every opportunity is an educational opportunity. Every opportunity, like when you talk about their culture, they'll literally sit you down and talk about how things progressed over time in New Zealand, how things were, how they used to be, how they are now. Have you ever seen We Once Were Warriors?
I haven't actually seen it, but I know.
Man, if you've never seen that movie, like somebody, this was like my first year in New Zealand, somebody was like, "Oh, true, bro, you from Chicago? That's true. Hey, look, but you gotta watch this movie, Once Were Warriors." I was like, okay. He's like to give you a good idea how we are, how we were back then, our struggles. And I was like, okay. It was a good movie. It was about cultural struggles and financial struggles and just it was a lot like family, but it just taught me a lot about how they prioritize family, how they look at family. That's one of the biggest. That would have been a really good highlight. One of my favorite highlights about New Zealand still to this day. Everything is about family, but the whānau, always, man. So everything is about family, but. No, you're right. Like it's definitely, but that's another segue because then you would have had to. Here you are starting a new family with your love that you found on Instagram. And now you have to try to find. How did you guys find a family to plug into? Because that's something a lot of migrants struggle with. Like, how did you do that?
I think for me it was not as hard because she had been here for 17 years now. So basically she grew up here and she already has got a community of people around her, friends and so for me it was more fitting into that community that was already around her. But I think that made it easy. But for me, in terms of building my own community or having people around me, a network of friends, or it was a bit of a journey, especially talking about the different cultures, that you do have, and
Do you have anything that this strictly Kiwi that you have a hard time kind of wrapping your head around, like?
Strictly Kiwi, I'm not so sure, but I think at first when I got here, it's more. You walk into a grocery store and it's on a cold day and you see somebody walking barefooted in the grocery store.
Now this is like I'm probably the third time I've heard this on this podcast. This is not from me, guys. This is from the guests. This is actually feedback from people who moved from another country and come and see it. It's like I've seen it, man. Like the first time I saw it, I was just like, oh, maybe he just doesn't have any shoes.
Yeah.
And then I kept seeing it, and I was like, should I take off my shoes? Am I being disrespectful? I actually thought it was like a Maori thing. I thought it was like, oh, is this something that's culturally disrespectful to wear shoes in the grocery store. Like I actually thought about it, and then I realized I asked somebody like, "No, Myron, it's not that. You know, this is just for people. It's a cultural thing. Some people are comfortable doing it, some people are not." And then like I tried to fit in, you know, one day, and I tried it. Took my shoes off and started to walk, and then the rocks went into my toes, and it hurt a lot. So I put my shoes back on. And it wasn't for me. It's not for me, man. It's not for everybody. You know.
I must say I tried it one time. Yeah, I think one time I was coming from the beach and I just needed to quickly get into the, you know, grocery store. And, you know, I was like, well, why not? Because I was in the car barefooted. So I just...
Did you get arrested? No, just...
This is not America. Right?
This is
what do you do?
Right.
But I actually did that, and I was like, oh well, nobody even cares. You know what I mean? Like,
They don't care.
you know, if it's back home, people look at you like, oh, what are you even doing in the city when you just got your sleepers on? You know, but you know, nobody cares. You just do what you do, and yeah.
I saw a guy in Countdown in full blown boxers and nothing else. Like nothing else, bro. Like he wasn't in shape.
Sure, they were boxers.
Man, I don't know what they were actually. I just know he wasn't in shape. He didn't have a 6-pack. I can tell you that.
Is that a thing that bothered you? He didn't have a 6-pack.
Yeah, that was part of the reason.
Not the fact that he had just his underwear on. Just
man, look, if he did a couple of crunchies or something, like it would have been different. But he actually came in like sloppy, and he came in no shoes, no shirt. Because at one point, Countdown was saying, "No shirt, no business" or something like that. Because people were taking advantage of it. I don't know about the Countdown in your area. This was in the summertime a couple of years ago. They were basically because people were taking advantage of it. People were coming in with no shirt because it's so lackadaisical here. People will take advantage of it as you do. Like, okay, no shoes, let me push it. No shirt, you know.
No trousers.
No trousers. No trousers. But this dude, man, like I had to record him. Like I had to get this on video, otherwise my family would not believe me. He was just walking up and down, shopping like everybody else, like nothing on. And I was just like, oh, see, that's. But I don't know, man. Like a part of that is actually kind of positive, because in a sense, it's like at least Kiwi people would just let people be.
Yeah, I would say the same. I think at first, the first days when we started staying together, me and my wife, it was more of, oh, I felt like I want KFC. And maybe it's like 10 p.m. and we just, you just quickly rush in the car. You're wearing your 90s and, you just get in the car. You just go by the drive-thru, and I was like, wow, drive-thru is right. And then next minute I get to the grocery store again. One time I see somebody with their morning gown and whatever. And I'm like, seriously? But, I then saw a lot more people coming in and I was like, well, this is a culture and people are sort of like more relaxed. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's more relaxed. Even when you talk about like formal way in terms of work.
Oh, man, don't get me started on that, man. Oh, my gosh.
Because, I always say to my wife, you guys say you do wear formal, but this is not formal. It's like a lot more relaxed. How can you be wearing a shirt and a formal shirt, formal trousers, and then you see somebody wearing a pair of sneakers or whatever? I'm like, these are running shoes, not formal shoes. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's a lot more relaxed. It's a lot more relaxed. Yeah.
I dressed up looking like Steve Harvey to my interview, like I had a job interview. I had a full 3-piece blue pinstripe suit on.
Wow, pinstripe.
Man, dude, because that's how that's America. Like, if you come to present yourself for a job interview, you actually need to present yourself on your best foot. You put your best foot forward. Like, this is me. I'm the total package. Yeah. Hire me. Like, that's how it's supposed to look. I went to the job interview. It was my second interview, and it was in Christchurch. And they were like, whoa, okay. Well, hello. You look nice. And this is I'm meeting with the GM of the company, and she's dressed professional, but not like how I was expecting. No, she just has a normal blouse on, and I think she was even wearing jeans at the time. And I looked like her boss. Wow. So that was the last time I did that.
Did you get the job?
Of course.
Oh, you did. I guess. So maybe the suit worked.
No, man, it wasn't the suit, man. It wasn't the suit. It's the guy in the suit.
But
the
I
guy
guess
in
you
the
got the
suit.
job, so we'll never know, right? Let's just leave it at that.
We can leave it at that.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you, like they were thrown off. Actually, the suit almost messed up the opportunity because they were thrown off. People get so like offended by it. Like it's just like like the culture mix is so different here. But anyway, all right. So we'll continue on. I would like to know if you had any immigration hacks or like tips and tricks for people who want to move over here, whether they're from your homeland or not.
I would say one of the tips that I would say is just be open and tell the truth. Because one thing that I've realized about immigration is they follow your story, even years later. I think for me, when I came, then I finally came on a visitor's visa. It was just a 6 months period, but then after the visitor's visa, we had to tell the truth. I'm coming to get married. This is the situation. They want to know everything back home. And it's always good to be open. Because if you tell a lie and there's a loophole in your story, then next time when you want to apply probably for a residence visa or whatever, it's going to be hard, because they do follow your story. So I say if you tell the truth, one of the tips, tell the truth, and I think it'll make life easier for you. Yeah.
But they follow you on social media? Immigration New Zealand? Or?
They don't follow you on social media, but they sort of like hold on to information that you have given them. So, for example, for us, we found out that maybe that's one of the tips again. Applying online was way easier than trying to sort out papers and sending application forms and whatever to embassies and stuff. I think just creating an online account and uploading everything online, it saved time and made everything easy. So It's like whatever they ask for, you give it to them and they keep track of that. So they have that in your account. Whatever stories that you tell, they have that. So years later, I remember one of the immigration officers when they called me in regards to having a partnership residence visa, and they said, "Oh yeah, by the way, some time ago you said this." I was like, wait a minute. I actually had a conversation with my wife and we were laughing after. I was like, wait a minute. They still went back to that information. You know what I mean? Like they follow your story, so they want to make sure that your intentions are still the same. Whatever reason that brought you to New Zealand, it's still the same reason and, nothing has changed or, that kind of thing. So tell the truth and I would say, just go online and if you want to do stuff. I get like people ask me how's the application process and stuff, and I just say, well, we're living in the digital age. Just go online and just try and search it up. Wherever I can. I think it helps if you have a person who is inside New Zealand to send you sometimes links that you don't know about. For example, the green list. People don't know about the green list.
What is the green list?
I don't know.
Do you know what it is?
I don't know.
What is that?
Funny thing is, I just bumped into it one of my work computers, and somebody was searching on the green list. But then I was like, wait a minute, what is this one? I didn't know about that. But then there's a green list that actually they post up jobs that are required in New Zealand or sort of like that are on demand in New Zealand, as opposed to there is the skilled workers list. Yep. But then there is the green list. So it also has a more detailed information about jobs, in New Zealand and stuff like that. So those are some of the things that probably if you're outside of New Zealand, you might not know about that. But when you're inside, you might then know about certain things that people on the outside don't know. So it helps to have somebody on the inside or just make friends and just talk to people in New Zealand and, I think, information might just, you learn something new, huh?
No, I did. I didn't know about that, which is I'm actually embarrassed to say that because I'm in recruitment. So I should know about the green list, and I had no idea. So thank you for that, and thank you for your story on your immigration story. Okay, let's get right into the cost of living part of the episode. Now, today, I just wanted to bring this up mainly because this is something that's affecting everybody globally. But, we're talking about New Zealand. We're here to talk about people who live in New Zealand. And here we're talking with Simba. And we also have my co-host, Danny Moinga, who is in financial services. Yeah. So he has keen insight on this topic, and it's perfect to have him here because opposed to me being overly opinionated, which I am apologizing. Well, I don't really apologize for that. Y'all know what y'all getting every time I open my mouth. But at least we have someone who actually has education and practical experience in this area. So, Simba, could you please, because I don't know much about Zimbabwe, could you please compare the cost of living, I guess the cost of living to, there and here, how what are the main differences?
I think there's a huge difference in terms of probably starting with currency. When you talk about currency in New Zealand, having a New Zealand dollar, and that's pretty much stable and has been there for years, But I think comparing it to back home, we used to have a currency that we did have, but and then at a certain point in time, I think because of inflation, inflation started to go up, and the value of the money starts to go down. And again, I'm just explaining in layman's terms, and just a general overview. Of how I saw things, and sort of now because of inflation going up, and now the money losing value, and the government having to try and find other ways of sustaining the economy and everything, and having to rob in other currencies. And at a certain point we had a multi-currency system using the South African rand, the US dollar and stuff, and I think the US dollar for a long time has stood as a currency that has been used. Probably I would say officially it has been used, but at some point it has been taken off, and people still use it, on the black market, and everything is just rated against the US dollar, So it's pretty crazy how having to move to New Zealand, the difference in terms of currency, because how the US dollar is powerful, but back then it was a little bit abused. When you go to a grocery store, you go buy a loaf of bread for $1. At times it goes up to $2. You know what I mean? But when you come to New Zealand, it's a little bit different. Even though we would say maybe looking at the rates that the US dollar is up is higher than the New Zealand dollar.
Yep.
But I would say that the way that cost of living was back home, it was pricey for somebody who was living within. But then when you come over here and you start to compare it as compared to New Zealand is expensive as well. It's pretty expensive as compared to.
So if you'd to bring that down to a practical example, let's just say I wanted to buy a week's worth of groceries in Zimbabwe. Would I be how much should I expect to spend? And do you guys have did you also had a Zimbabwe dollar as well? Or?
So they started to use what they call the bond note.
Yep.
And I'm not so sure, probably
what's that?
Just bonds.
Yeah,
bonds.
Yeah, bond note.
Bond note, yeah.
So it's not.
Okay.
I wouldn't say it's actual currency we used to have a Zimbabwe dollar, but then when I left, they were now using the bond note. So I think they would rate it against the actual currency.
Yep.
And carry some kind of value, some sort of value that it carries, and but then the the thing about it was because of inflation, the rate keeps changing, and you're still trying to compare it against the US dollar and stuff, and so it becomes pretty pricey.
So it costs a lot to buy just normal groceries.
To buy just normal groceries, it will become
And the same.
But I guess what's quite interesting is that you mentioned as an example that, say, to buy a loaf of bread was like say $1 or $2, right? US dollars.
Yeah.
Right. If you were to compare that to New Zealand, it could be about the same price, because the loaf of bread here is what is it? You can get a loaf of bread for
the cheapest one now. They've risen the price. They've risen the price recently. That's the thing. That's why I wanted to talk about this, because it used to be $1.
Yeah.
For the cheapest one, and now it's not like $1.89 for the cheapest one.
Yeah. Okay.
Which is pretty much $2. That's a big difference, man.
Yeah, and I was sort of raising that point because if you, for example, the price of bread in Zimbabwe was $1, US dollars, right? What does that mean in terms of people's wages, right? Do people earn enough to be able to actually afford a price of a loaf of bread for $1? And I think it'll be quite interesting just to get what that looks like. So what are wages like in Zimbabwe?
So I wouldn't quite have an exact amount, or because it's been a while, and during the time that I left, it was sort of like different depending on the company, because some people you would be considered as working for a good company if you're earning US dollars, because pretty much most of the people were earning the bone knot, and then you have to convert your bone knots into the US dollar in order for you to then buy groceries, whatever. Jeez. And because the rate is always changing, at the end of the day, you then realize that maybe you get paid let's say $500, and then you convert that, and then maybe I don't know how much, maybe you have $200 US dollars, and then so you need to pay rent, you need to pay the bills, groceries and stuff. At the end of the day, it becomes pricey, for you to be able to afford all of that.
So it sounds like moving here, you kind of already preempted to stretch $1. You already knew how to do that, because it sounds like where you come from, you actually already knew, because like the changes that people have gone through here in New Zealand, like specifically in this city, in Auckland, it has been dramatic. Like it's just like there's always been a gap between the haves and the have-nots. Let's be honest, no matter where you are, but that gap just got dramatically wider, and then in the last 2 years because of the lockdowns and say, I don't know, I'm not the expert. This is just me shooting in the dark. I mean, from what I've seen, when COVID hit, COVID changed everything, and now slowly but surely they've raised prices on stuff. It was the import and export. That's the thing. The freight. We couldn't get supplies in, couldn't get things in, and everything. It was this huge freight issue. Even now, still things are struggling to kind of come in at the rate they were in, and so supply issues, distribution issue, and then of course it eventually trickles down to the supermarkets. I remember going in the countdown like a couple of times, thinking like, is this like one of those apocalyptic type movies?
Shelves are empty and stuff.
Like shelves are empty, but you know what goes first? Tissue for some reason. I don't know why.
Right.
I don't know what that's about. Because I'll be going.
A different topic.
That's another.
Hold on a minute.
I would be going for the cereals, and the non-perishable goods, canned goods.
Yeah, because I was just thinking, if you don't have enough food to eat, why are you buying so much tissue? Like,
you gonna
do that? Right?
Tissue is cleaned out, man. I'm like, what is going on here? Like, y'all gonna leave all this rice behind? Okay, I'll take it. But it's like, man, you already kind of have that preemptive, like, okay, I need to know how to stretch, because it's been hard for a lot of people. In New Zealand, and I just want to know, like, for your family, like, what have you guys? Because obviously, do you have any children?
I do. I've got a 10-month-old.
10-month-old. Yeah. Okay. So you just family of 3 at this point. So, have you guys made any specific changes to try to?
I think the changes that we made were right from the start. I think me having to come here, like what you said, it's a matter of you have or you do not have.
Yeah.
And it was pretty much the thing back home as well. You know, you in an environment where at one point you had the goods in the shops, but then the money was hard to get, you know, and then it flipped on the other side. Now it's now like the money is just there, but it was hard to get the goods in the store. You know, you get in, like, you know, you can't. There's limited number of goods in the shops. So I think things having to move, you know, in those directions. So it's more like at a certain point you don't have. It's either you don't have, you know, or you have got a lot, you know, and there's no middle gap. But when I came here, it's more like, okay, how do we try to manage things? How do we try to make it work? Especially, I remember one of my experiences when I wanted to buy a pair of shoes, because back home, before I left, I went into a shop and for $10 I bought a pair of I don't know what you call Converse.
Wow, $10.
$10.
Yeah, they were going for $10. Probably must have been you know, those
Made in some country, which we won't name, right?
kind of thing. But the price $10, right? And then you get somebody saying, "Well, this has been imported, so I'm selling it for $10." You know, but then somebody gets to sell it for maybe for $5 or whatever price. You know, so when you compare 5 and 10, you're like, well, 10 is a bit pricey, so that puts a bit of originality in the. You know, people sort of like associate a higher price with more. It's more original kind of thing.
Authentic,
But when I came here and I walk into a shop, I want to buy a pair of shoes, and so I think the hardest struggle was trying to convert currencies and stuff. And so, okay, is this expensive? Is this cheap? And I then figured out that it was expensive. You know, buying a pair of shoes here was a little bit pricey.
Yeah.
Well, that was before I knew the warehouse and the Kmart and
Gone for Kmart.
and all those other places. But I mean, you know what I'm talking about? When you just get into New Zealand and you don't know all about the warehouse, Kmart, and you just, you know, get to a mall and walk into a store and, you know, and so trying to convert that, I was like, wait a minute, this is actually quite pricey, you know, and so it was more having to make an adjustment now in terms of, okay, this is what I have. How do I make it work? You know.
So what I find quite interesting in this discussion is, it seems as though, say in Zimbabwe as an example, right? You know, say people might not be earning as much as, say, people in New Zealand, right? But they're managing to live just fine because the cost of goods there, for some reason, it's cheaper, right? Things tend to be cheaper. You can buy a pair of shoes for $10, right? And therefore, you don't necessarily need to earn, like, you know, say $2,000 a month for you to be able to do all of these things that you need to do, right? Whereas in New Zealand, like you rightly said, you know, a pair of shoes will cost you $120, right? It's quite different. And that's always quite interesting. I think it's all your kind of your supply and demand thing, right? Whereas for some reason, there's a lot more supply in Zimbabwe by the sounds of it, right? They're able to sell things at a much cheaper price.
But the tricky thing, though, Danny, like what you brought up before, like, well, in the car anyway, we were talking about wages on the way here. And you even brought it up to Simba just now, like me being in recruitment, this is what I've seen. Like, okay, so yeah, they raised minimum wage here in New Zealand. They did it. They did think they do it every year or whatever, raise minimum wage. But the problem is, like, people aren't working. So it's just like, and people do, and I'm not saying all people, because I'm working, you know, but I'm saying, like, what we find in the recruitment industry is people don't really want to work. There's a lack of motivation for people to work. Therefore, if you get all these people not wanting to work, and then you have the media pumping mass hysteria about the shortages and the petrol prices going up, and this is happening, and this is going to cost more, and that's going to cost more. So, like, I guess I wanted to ask you on, like, how should someone go about making those adjustments how should they avoid misinformation? Because misinformation is the real culprit here.
Yeah.
And how, like, from your perspective, is obviously you've been in the financial services industry for years. So can you tell me, like, how can someone go about avoiding that misinformation to kind of not just survive in times like this, but kind of like, thrive?
Yeah, well, that's it's an interesting question. It's pretty loaded, and it might need a lot more time to break it down. But
It shows how much I believe in you to answer the question.
It's just the time, right? But I think, look, here's what I can say, right? But I actually think you're right in terms of kind of it's quite important to be informed, but also to ensure that, like you sort of touched on, we are getting the information from the right sources, right? But even that as well, we also need to make sure, I think, we're looking at a diverse set of information, because whether we like it or not, whether you're looking at TV One or any other sort of general media outlets, right? To be honest, right, everyone's got a perspective, everyone's got a particular viewpoint that they're trying to sell, right? So I think it's really making sure that as much as possible you're listening to quite a few different diverse opinions and views, right? And then kind of try and sort of get the best out of everything you're hearing, right? That's one thing. But I think the other side as well is that I would probably say that at the end of the day, right, one of the key differences between, say, the Western world and some of the other developing countries is that you can actually choose and decide not to work, right? Because the government, is structured in such a way that they look after people that can't work, can't afford to work. There's that, right? There's that support you get, right? So it's quite funny that people have work and jobs, but they don't really have to take them because the government is there to actually help and support, people. Whereas I'd imagine in some countries, right? Yeah. Whereas it's not the case of people not wanting to work. There's no work.
Yep.
Right. So it's a really, really weird way of looking at this, in a way that, the government is, as some of the Western governments, they're structured well enough to be able to support the population if they're not working. But I think the other side as well is that if you take that particular pathway, it just means that you won't have as much disposable income as you would have if you were working. Right. So, for example, if you had a job and, the job in itself was, I suppose, a reasonable job, and you get paid kind of well enough, you probably get paid more than you would get from the government in terms of the stipend from the government, right? So I think that's one of the things you got to think about. So, for example, if your decision is not to work because the government is going to pay for, for my food or whatever it is, right? Well, the government will give you just enough for your food, right? But then some of the luxury, leisure things that you might want to do, right? You won't be able to do that because the government doesn't give you, enough of that, right? So again, I think it kind of comes down to, I think as an individual as well, you got to ask yourself that question, right? Am I okay or comfortable to just sit back and, be sort of looked after, or do I want to also contribute to the economy as well, right? Because I think sometimes things get worse when everyone just sits back and does nothing.
This is true.
Right? So I think it does come down to, hopefully, the mentality we need to have is actually, I need to play a role in this, community I live in. I need to play my part in making sure the economy is actually doing well, and the best way we can do that is get involved. Right, not just sitting back and waiting for everybody else to look after you.
I think as you're saying that, I think one of the things that I would want to add on is an interesting thing that happened when my son was born, and I was asking my wife the whole time, so how much do we have to pay for hospital bills and whatever? And she's like, no, we don't have to pay. Yeah. I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, the government takes care of that. Whereas back home is a little different, I was like, what? But then later on, I then realized that, well, people do cry over taxes. But then I was like, well, if I have to go through this whole process and I'm not paying anything, Paul, then at least my taxes are, at least they're, amounting to something. At the end of the month, when your taxes get, you pay your taxes. I mean, if there is something at the end of the day that you're benefiting out of that, then, probably is a perspective coming from a place where I'm like, okay, I have to pay for maternity bills. I have to pay for this. I have to pay for that. So it's actually a space where you see probably a system that's a little bit more efficient, so.
Yeah.
I got a bone to pick with that.
Oh yeah, pray tell.
Yeah. The thing is, man, like, it's efficient in some areas, yes, especially in the baby making area. I definitely agree with that. Like, New Zealand's amazing when it comes to looking after kids, but it's like this system. Me being here for 8 years, I've noticed that it kind of is set up to support itself. for the now, not moving forward. We and I'm saying we because I've been here long enough to say we. I'm no longer saying them because I'm here. Like, we are actually not moving forward. We are creating financial systems that support the now. So, prime example, this thing about the wage. What happens is a social issue will be risen in the community. The community will make noise about it. Other communities get involved. They make a bigger noise. And then whoever is in power at that time, whether it be labor or national, then they actually have to do something about it. And then it's, okay, we fix this problem. Or they do something to fix the problem. But then that's just another now problem fix. I don't really see that much forward thinking. That's what I'm saying. Like, when migrants come in, historically, and I've said this before on this podcast, when migrants come into any country, if you research what migrants do to nations, they make them better. They move them forward because they bring in new ideas. They bring in new perspectives. And it's just like, I love New Zealand, but it's just one of the things that I feel like New Zealand really needs to work on, that forward thinking mentality. It's just not there. Financially, I feel like we always try to blame. It's easy to blame the government and say, "Oh, the government shouldn't be paying, these people so much to sit at home on the benefit this and that." That's only one aspect of it. It's actually a lot more going on than that. Because even if we fix that part, there's a psychological part that's even worse than that. And then we fund. It just seems like everything, the money gets like plotted out so quickly, like to cover like a Band-Aid approach. It's like I was always this, you know what I mean?
Well, hold on a minute, but. So give us an example of sort of the forward thinking that, say, America is doing, just so that we all understand what you're actually talking about.
Okay, let's just say engineering, for example. Like, remember the Industrial Revolution? When the Industrial Revolution happened.
Oh, okay, that's hundreds of years ago. Yes.
Yeah, I'm using that as an example
yes.
because it's relevant because. A lot of the designs, like not a lot of them, but some of the designs they had from the machinery came from migrant people. Like, it was migrant people pulling things. It was some Americans too, but it was migrant people pulling people like forward to do, like, this is what's going to happen. Like, and that's innovation, but I'm just using that part as an example. I'm trying to it's kind of hard to pull that into the financial arena because it seems like we were just having this conversation earlier today at work about how strong the Australian economy is versus New Zealand, how like
okay, and look, and I think there's a lot to that, right? We can spend a lot of time talking about that, but you have to consider a whole bunch of things that go into making an economy sort of big or small from a GDP point of view, right? So if you, for example, look at, say, New Zealand, right, compared to Australia, the most obvious thing that you probably see is the difference in population.
Yeah,
right. So whether you like it or not, that has an impact. Right?
No, it
for
does.
example, how fast the country can grow, right? And other things you might have, like, for example, location, right? New Zealand literally sits, quite far from literally everybody else. The closest countries that are, closest places close to New Zealand are some of the islands, right? And Australia as well. But so for example, you don't necessarily get, sort of migrants coming in the way you have migrants going into Europe, as an example, right? Because Europe is close together. So there's a whole bunch of things that go into making up a country's ability to, the economy of a country, basically, right? So I think that when people talk about New Zealand, to sort of borrow your phrase or paraphrase what you said around, maybe we're not doing enough around innovation. Actually, there's actually quite a lot going on in New Zealand from an innovation point of view. Right? Now, whether people are aware of that is a whole other thing, right? And imagine, think of this way: New Zealand's got what is it, 5 million people now, right? Yeah. But at the same time as well, there's actually some really strong industries within New Zealand, right? Now, I guess maybe what I'm sort of hearing here is that how do we ensure that people actually know more around what's going on?
Yeah,
right? The
back to
innovation's
information.
Going on,
that's
right?
the part I was.
Yeah, and so maybe that's kind of the thing that's missing. It's not so much that there's not enough going on, because there's actually quite a bit going on. There's a lot of really great startups, really smart companies doing some really cool stuff.
Okay, so thank you for correcting me, because that's what I was saying. Like, that information is not.
Yeah, okay, and I get that.
It's not on the billboards. What is on the billboards is scary petrol prices and this and this and that, and it's just feel like it's aimed at people like Simba and small families who are here. They've migrated here to New Zealand, and then when they say cost of living, they're talking about, we just want to go to KFC tonight and not break the bank.
Yeah.
That's when they say when families like Simba's family say that, they say we just want to be able to get groceries and pay for grandma's birthday. She wants a nice steak. We don't really buy steak often, but I want to be able, but you can't afford a steak when they've risen everything another 30% or another 20% here, 20% there. It just feels like the low income or mid-level income people always get the lower end of the stick. Meanwhile, that gap for the people who are well off just seem to get richer and richer. And then that goes into the category of the people overseas who are buying all the properties and all these different things. And the property market is another nightmare in itself. You have to save up for 800 years to buy a doghouse. It's just that's what we're living in right now. And it's just I get passionate about it because I'm living in it right now. Like I'm trying to buy a house right now, and like it's just you just scraping together everything.
And you know what? And again, like I said, there's so much to this discussion. But if you kind of think about what you said right now, if you're talking about sort of buying sort of the property market, as it were, right? Or if you're talking about Auckland. Yeah, absolutely, right? There's some crazy stuff going on here, but there's nothing stopping people from obviously, I kind of know one thing people can stop people, but you can actually look outside of Auckland. So if everyone is trying to, centralize in Auckland, of course that's going to push the prices up because you have a lot more demand, right? There's other places outside of Auckland that have houses that are a little bit cheaper. Now, you might argue and say, actually, well, there aren't as many jobs on the outside of Auckland that would, for example, tempt me to go and live somewhere else, right? Now, I think that's more of a legitimate discussion. We can talk about that, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what I would say. That's exactly what I would say.
Yeah, but then I guess this is what now, I suppose, if we're going to talk about certain things, maybe that's what we look at, right? Not so much, because if you talk about just, well, the house prices are really expensive in Auckland, of course they are, because there's a lot more demand in Auckland. Right, so there's a lot more that we can kind of get into. I just feel like sometimes when we have these discussions, they tend to sometimes either focus on one particular area without seeing the bigger picture, and sometimes you get lost in that. And this is what we have to be really careful when we talk about this sort of things. Like you said, sometimes the media sort of pushes certain sort of narratives, right? But we also have to avoid pushing the same narrative as well, right? So how do we make sure actually when we talk, let's lay out all the cards on the table?
When you say cost of living, all I'm saying is when you say cost of living, you think of lifestyle. You came over here for a certain lifestyle. I mean, aside from you being in love, I know that was really important as well. But like, honestly, it's the lifestyle of New Zealand. Like for me, what sold me on New Zealand was the lifestyle. What sold people on New Zealand is the lifestyle that they can have here. Like I haven't ducked not one bullet since I've been here. I've never thought about it.
You're still alive as well, right?
Still alive. I've never thought about it. I've walked down the street, never thought about being shot. Whereas we're back home where I'm from, in certain areas where my brother still lives right now, he's got to be careful in certain areas because he it can be just like that. But around here, that's not what happens. Even when people do get shot around here, it's like it's not the frequency. It's not there. So it's a certain lifestyle of being able to go to the supermarket without your shoes. That's even a part of the lifestyle itself. That Kiwi culture, people want that. So now the cost of that has changed. So that's what we're saying. That's what people love about New Zealand. Even when you told me your immigration story, you didn't come here as a refugee. You didn't come here, but you still enjoy the lifestyle. The lifestyle here is bar none one of the best I've ever experienced. But now that cost is just getting really unbearable, and that's all I'm saying. And that's all I'm saying. And I just wish the information was spread better so we can be more informed because people are making silly decisions.
I think it has, and I think one thing that I had been thinking about was that when prices go up and stuff, and you sort of like have to break the bank to do your monthly groceries, it's kind of pushing people in a space where you have to work hard, and I think I've experienced sort of like the same thing happening back home where you've got relatives in like neighboring South Africa, and then you get cases like xenophobia happening, and the residents of the country are saying, hey, you guys need to go back to your own country because you're taking all our opportunities. Because what happens is the migrant is ready to work and ready to pull like ridiculous hours in order to make money, in order to make it work, And so I think it when that happens, it pushes, especially when it comes to the migrants, to even have to work a little bit more and sort of like for you to have to make more money. And I think it's one of the things that we steady don't realize, but then it puts people in a space where you now have people having mental issues, have people committing suicide and things like that because they're overworking themselves and they don't realize, they're just grabbing the opportunities as they come because they say, well, the cost of living is high, the rent has gone up, gas price has gone up, and I need to pay for all of that. So,
I suppose one other thing that, again, if we were to lay out the cards on the table, right, we are living in sort of unprecedented times, and this is just globally, right? There's obviously the last 2 years have been, quite odd. There's a lot that's sort of taken place that's been quite different from what we've seen before, right? And so, granted, New Zealand has its fair share of some issues to deal with because of the last 2 years. Other countries are the same as well, right? And I think we kind of have to acknowledge that as well. So,
100%.
It's not like all of a sudden New Zealand is the only country that's struggling with these things, right? I'm 100% certain that if you went to England, where I was talking to some of my friends, who were saying that actually the cost of, gas has gone up, right? Utility bills are actually gone up way high, right? So I'd imagine if there was a podcast in England where there were people like us talking, they would probably be looking at a different set of problems, right? Because like I said, right, the pandemic, the war in Russia and Ukraine, all of those things coming together, right? They essentially sort of putting the world in a very weird and strange place to an extent that, like you said, now we're seeing more of a bigger gap between the haves and have-nots, right? Because those that have already are probably positioned in such a way that they can actually invest and actually get more.
Yes.
Right? Because they've done that. And I think in a way, and I'm sure people won't like this, but sometimes it kind of comes down to, if you look at, for example, a particular a population, right? What is the education level of the people within the particular population as well, right? Because sometimes what you find is that if you have a lot of people that, I guess, if you have, for example, a lot more people in the blue collar kind of work, right? They tend to start to struggle more in these sort of areas, right? Whereas you might then have, I guess, people that might be in your white collar kind of jobs, right? That tend to actually do really well in these sort of situations, right? So I just feel like there's quite a lot that we can sort of get into, but I think it's definitely worthwhile acknowledging that actually we are living in a really strange time. The last 2 years have been pretty much really like weird around the globe, around the world, right? And New Zealand is not exempt to that. So there's some things in New Zealand we have to deal with because of the last 2 years because of the pandemic. Some things America has to deal with because of the pandemic. Some things Zimbabwe has to deal with because of the pandemic, right? So I think, it's good that we are having this discussion because it's more of a New Zealand context, right? So like you said, so how do we help ourselves? Well, what can we do, right? How do we help each other to come through this?
That's a tough one, man. That's a whole nother podcast in itself.
Yeah.
But I think we have run out of time for this one. But it is tough. I will agree with you. In closing, I will say, obviously coming from a different culture, where things are different and things are tough, where you are and where you were, and definitely things are tough where you are. But I guess the positive to pull from that is when you go through hard things, you can be prepared for hard things. And I think where you come from, it kind of prepared you to be the solid man that you are now. Whereas, like you say, migrants come over here ready to work. Whereas someone who's been here in New Zealand their whole life, even though gas prices, petrol prices went up and food went up, they still don't have that initiative to, go out and get it done. Not everybody. I'm not generalizing all Kiwis. I'm just saying that some people, it's kind of hard to snap into that. Like, let me get the work done. But like you said, I also want to piggyback on what you said, Danny. Like, we do need to take the initiative and not just expect people to just, hand things out. It's tough. It's tough all around. It's tough. You're right. It's tough globally. I get too passionate about these conversations. But this is who I am. But but thank you, Simba. Yeah, man, and I hope that you continue to enjoy New Zealand as I have for the past 8 years. Me and my family, and unless you have anything else, Danny, we can bring this to a close.
Yeah, no, I'm good. Yeah, it was a good chat. I just feel like there's quite a few topics in here that we've touched on. Almost like you said,
they've given birth to new podcasts.
Yeah, you just need a bit more.
Definitely.
So please direct all your angry comments to me.
Yeah, that's right.
Not my co-host. I can handle it.
Yeah,
Actually,
I can't. Yes.
I want all the smoke. So, that's... All right, we're signing off. Thank you for watching. We're done. All right, guys, thank you for watching another extremely intriguing and engaging episode of the Immigration Status Podcast. Big thank you to the Ministry of Ethnic Communities, Uranga. Big thank you to the Campfire Studios and Navigators, of course. Wow, that was a mouthful. Definitely enjoyed every bit of that conversation. I hope you did too. Episode 4 is on the way, but I want to just say thank you. Like, I can't say thank you enough. I know you're probably tired of hearing me say thank you, but every time you click play, whether it's through Spotify or whether it's just watching on YouTube, you show your support. So we actually we're gonna be soon funneling everything through the website, and you guys can actually subscribe to the content and get updates. And just can't wait to see how this turns out in the future. Thank you for coming along the journey with us, and we'll see you next time on episode 4. I'm Myron Turner. Peace.